so glad that you've joined us here this morning as we wrap up our message series we've been calling I Want to Believe But. If you've been with us in previous weeks, you know we've been talking about the reality that there's a lot of people rejecting God. And what we've tried to tell you is that we don't think people are necessarily rejecting God himself, more their distorted view of who they think God is. The first week we talked about killjoy God, where people come and say, well, God, that's just a bunch of rules and do's and don'ts and these and thous. I don't want to be beholden to all that. And we found out that religion complicates what Jesus made simple with love. And this next week we talked about goosebump God. A lot of people say, well, I want to believe in God, but I just don't feel him. I don't get the tingly winglies. And I told you and I talked to you and saying that that's not how God works. Always feeling God isn't how he works. And today I want to talk about what I think is probably the most common reason that most people, if you said why they don't want to believe in God or trust God, is because they would call God heartless. They would say, well, I want to believe in God, but he just doesn't seem to care. Well, I want to share a little bit of my story today, in case you don't know, because sometimes I think you go, well, Pastor, you've got it all together. You get to stand up on the stage and you know, you talk to God. You've got this whole God thing figured out. Well, I don't. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. When I was 12 years old, I got a condition called nephrotic syndrome. And nephrotic syndrome is my kidneys completely shut down. I had to be pulled out of school, put on bed rest. I gained like 35 pounds of water weight in like a week. My legs were, humongous. I was in congestive heart failure. And a lot of things had to change. I had to change my diet. At 12 years old, I was told I needed to eat tofu. Tofu's disgusting. It's not really a food. It has no flavor. Yeah, I'm not really sure. So at 12, I went from eating pizza one day to being told tofu is your new best friend. I couldn't have salt on anything. There was a lot of restrictions. Being in and out of doctor's offices 2 and 3 times a week, I was sent to specialists up at Children's Hospital up in Seattle, in and out. I can remember couple months into my diagnosis, being sat down in a doctor's office and being told at 12 years old, we hate to tell you this, and this is a really big burden for a kid at 12 years old to handle, but at this point, we recommend you never have kids. And for me, that was really hard because at 12 years old, I ran my own 2-year-old children's church Sunday school class. I loved kids. I babysat every chance I got. My whole goal in life at that time was to grow up, go to school, get married so I could have kids and start a family. I loved kids. So in one instant to be told that's really not a good idea. Like, it will kill you. The strain that pregnancy would put on your kidneys will kill you. So I spent the next few years in and out of doctor's offices. Every time they'd taper my medication down, literally to like a half a dose every other day. When I went to not taking it, my kidneys would shut down, and we'd get to start the whole process over again. And this went on for several years. I could have sat down and had a pity party right then and there and gone, well, God, that's it. Like, I'm 12 and you've already messed up my whole life. The goal I wanted was to have kids, and I don't get to do that. I'm very sick. I don't get to do the things. I had to stop playing sports. I don't get to go to school. Everything about my life isn't what I wanted it to be. So God, why would you be so cruel? Why would you do this to me? You must not really care. You must not really see me. I must not be that important to you if you're letting me go through this. And the opposite happened because I sat there and I went, God, there must be a purpose in this. So what do you want me to know? How can I know you better so I can understand why I'm going through this? I learned to trust him completely at a really young age. And looking back now, I can understand that it was the foundation piece I was going to need to get me through a lot more things that were going to happen. In 2010, my best friend and mom was diagnosed with a very rare form of uterine cancer. She got a uterine sarcoma. 7 years ago last week, God called her home to heaven. I could have said, that's it. I'm throwing my hands up. I'm sitting on the ground. I'm all done. I'm not doing any more of this stuff, God. Why me? Why is this happening? What did I do? What did I not do? I could have gotten mad. I could have said, God, that's it. I'm walking away. You really don't care. You really don't have a plan and a purpose. And instead, I allowed God to open my eyes to see other people's hurt and other people's disappointments and other people's frustrations. I began to listen better and follow God's prompting more. See, I didn't let something I didn't understand in my human understanding put a wedge between me and God. If you don't know, I'm divorced. Pastor Aaron is not Thomas and Savannah's biological dad. So I understand the hurt and frustration when you've set out your life plan and the person that you made that plan to go with all of a sudden isn't going to go on the journey with you. So I get the hurt and frustration and the why, God, why is this happening? I get the thought process of why God, why me, why more? Some of you have gone through the same circumstances I've listed today. Some have gone through similar. Chances are good that most of you at some point have had a challenge. Maybe you're going through one right now. You're trying to say, God, I'm praying, I'm believing, but there's all this going on, God. Why does it keep happening? Why is every time I feel like I get up, I get knocked back down? You turn on the TV, you open up a news app, and you see terrorist attacks, and you see natural disasters, and you go, well, how could a God who cares allow all this to happen to people? It could be something very personal. I know some of the stories in this room. I know for some of you that there's been abuse in significant ways. Some of you are the one who love that person who's been abused. And you go, why, God? Why would you allow that? It doesn't seem fair. Maybe it's as simple as you're praying for headaches that won't go away. You're praying for your child who needs God. You're doing your best, and you go, God, isn't my best good enough, God? And you sit there and you'll find yourself in a moment of quiet saying, God, are you real? God, are you there? God, do you care? I want to believe, but man, God seems pretty heartless. So if you ever have felt that way, I want to tell you as your pastor, right now, right here, right today, maybe for the first time anyone's ever said it to you, you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling like sometimes, God, I don't get it. God, you must not care if this is all happening. I think sometimes we open this book and we're told to look to the people in this book. And we go, man, look at how great they were. Look how strong they were. Look at all the things they accomplished. I couldn't measure up. I can't do that. David's listed in the Bible as a man after God's own heart. But if you really read David's story, David was in your boat at one time where he sat there and he said, God, I'm surrounded on all sides by my enemies. Why me? God, if you're really with me, if you're really going to be victorious here, why are you allowing all this to happen? What about Job? Now, Job's a long book, so some of you may have started and gone, yeah, that's too much to read. But Job is a guy, it's an interesting story. So I'm not going to make you read. We're not going to read all 42 chapters right now. I'm going to give you the synopsis of it. So Job is a guy who God has blessed. He's got the family and the kids and the farmland and the animals and the servants, and his life is going really good. And one day Satan goes to God and he goes, hey God, the only reason Job likes you is because you've given him all that cool stuff. He goes, I bet if you let me take some of his cool stuff away, I bet he won't like you so much anymore. God goes, okay, you get to test Job. You can do anything but take his life. So all of his children are killed. All of his livestock are killed. His fields are burned, and his body is covered in boils. His friends go, you must have really screwed up, and God hates you right now, so we don't really want to, hang around you. His wife looks at him at one time and is like, you know what? Why don't you just curse God and die? Can you imagine your spouse, the person that's supposed to love and support you, looking at you going, you know what? Life might just be simpler if you just died. You're going, I'm going through the worst time in my life, and the person who's supposed to support me is going, yeah, this would be better if you just weren't here. Where are you, God? This really doesn't seem fair. So if you've ever been in the place where you wanted to believe that God was good, but you just don't get it at the moment, you're not the only one. So in the rest of our time together, I'm going to give you two thoughts. I want you to know that I'm not going to be able to answer every question you have about why me. Why did God let this happen? Why did I go through this? I can't do that. Now, I can point you to the one who one day when you get to heaven, you are welcome to bring your laundry list and sit at God's feet and say, God, why did this and why did this? And I don't understand, and that was really difficult, and you shouldn't have. Now, I'm pretty much guaranteeing you, you are welcome to keep that list running from now till you die. But when you get to heaven, I'm pretty sure you're going to be too busy just hanging out in God's presence to ask the questions, but feel free to make the list and keep it in your pocket so when you die, you can ask God all of your whys. But I want you to remember, when God doesn't seem fair, that God always has a purpose in your pain. If you're filling in your notes, that's your first blank. God always has a purpose in your pain. See, even when you're hurting, God's still working. Some of you, it might be that you're saying, that person let me down. I get what that's like. I was married for 11 years and woke up one day and had somebody say, you know, I can't do this with you anymore. So I get the what on earth happened, how did I get here questions. Some of you today, you've lost somebody who was important to you. I get that. I lost my best friend. I get that hurt. I get that. I miss my mom crazy. Now, I don't miss Jane enough to ever say I want her back here on earth. She's in heaven. She's having the time of her life. She's pain-free. Why on earth would I say she needed to stick around here on earth? I don't care that she was hurt and miserable. She needed to do that so I felt better. Oh, no. I won't challenge God on his judgment. Not one day. I'll tell you it hurts. I'll tell you the part that hurts the most is being a mom. And that she doesn't get to see all the amazing things that Thomas and Savannah do. Thomas, the day before school starts, I've always homeschooled Thomas, and he is now in traditional school. And Thomas broke his ring finger on his left hand. He got a mallet fracture. And so his plan was he was going to play football. And he broke his finger the day before, and he doesn't get to play football. So he decides he's going to try out for cross country, which you have to understand, I have a kid that doesn't run. So I thought this was hilarious. But he's like, Mom, I'm trying out for cross country. And I said, go for it. I will support you. So a week ago, Saturday, Aaron and I stood at the finish line and cheered for our son as he runs across the finish line. Wasn't the fastest kid. That's the moment I wish she was there to say, look at what he's doing. He's out there. He's doing something new and adventurous that I never thought he'd do. So I get I miss the person. I get that hurt. Maybe it's the broken relationship that you don't get. Maybe life's just not going the way you wanted. Because we all set it and we say, I want to go in this direction, and I want life to be good and easy. And all of a sudden you're looking around going, why does every time that I think it's going to get better, we just hit one bump after another? God, I feel like running through one of those gauntlet things, and things are swinging left and right, and I'm ducking, and I just can't seem to get ahead. God, why? What's going on? It could be as big as cancer or as small as a sore throat on the day that you've got to stand up in front of the office and present your new idea. The flat tire on your way to the job interview. And you're sitting there going, I just don't know where you are, God. I don't get it. Wherever you're hurting, whatever level you're hurting at, however personal it may feel, God's right there with you. He's in it. He didn't go, well, you're hurting now. You're a bummer. Yeah, I'm going to go hang out over there for a while till you, figure out you. No. God's not about that. God has a purpose in the pain. He's using difficult times to do something in you. Now, please understand, God doesn't do bad things to you. We've talked about this. God is not a lightning bolt God. He is not sitting up in heaven hurling things down because you messed up. He already knew you were going to mess up. He sent his son to die thousands of years ago in knowing you were going to mess up. You were going to relapse. You were going to have the broken marriage. You were going to cheat. All the things you're ever going to do, he knew, and he still went, yep, I choose you. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 through 7 describes difficult times, and I love this. It says, there is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. It's right there in black and white. This book was written long before any of you showed up on earth. So God already knew and wanted you to know he was ready for you. He had the word penned specifically for you, so you knew when the trials came, he knew it's coming. And he's not abandoning you. When you don't understand and the difficult times come, God's still there. He's still working. It says, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than just mere gold. See, when your faith remains strong, it brings much praise and glory and honor to Christ. So that when Jesus is revealed to the whole world, you get to stand there and go, yeah, that's my God. That's my dad. That's my champion. So God has a purpose. He's doing something in you. You don't understand it. It's okay not to understand. God's using this to strengthen you. See, when you run towards him, your roots, your spiritual roots, grow deeper. Aaron and I were watching a video of the hurricane hitting San Juan this week. And it was interesting. We were laughing because 2 years ago we were in San Juan, and I lived for a while down in Miami or whatever with these giant palm trees. And I was fascinated by this video showing palm trees swaying hugely, and most of the fronds had been ripped off or whatever. But I said, look those things are 20 or 30 or 40 feet tall. And God created them to be able to take hundreds of mile-an-hour winds and sway and bend, but they don't often get uprooted because their roots go down. They're strong. They're meant to hold on. See, when you keep getting knocked down, it's because your roots aren't deep enough. Your roots aren't strong enough. So instead of running away from God, you got to start running towards God. You got to remember when the pain is out there, your butt needs to be in here. I love when people come to me and they go, well, Pastor Charity, life's just been so rough, so I stopped going to church. How's that going for you? Because generally when you hang out outside these doors too long, life feels overwhelming. You get battled. You get pushed down. You show up in here because this is where we strengthen your roots so you can handle that storm out there. See, God doesn't cause your pain, but he's going to work through your pain every single time. See, I can look back at the difficult seasons that I talked to you about. And I can see God working in my hurt, in my pain, in my not understanding at that moment. God strengthened me every single time. So when the next storm came, I'd be stronger. My roots would be deeper. I'd be able to handle it. I wouldn't be knocked down so easily. I wouldn't be so uncertain that he was going to show up. I've had some uncertainty going on in my world recently, and I wasn't sure what it was for, where I was going. And I knew that I made a commitment to say, God, I'm not going to get sidetracked in this. Instead of me trying to figure it out, God, I'm going to do what you've called me to do, and I want to reach out and help more people and serve in more ways. So to say, God, open my eyes to where you need me to help people. A couple Saturdays ago, we're at the house, and the doorbell rings at my house. Now, the doorbell only ever rings at my house if it's a package. So if you come to my house, you should call, because I don't answer the door. I don't answer my house phone, and I don't answer my front door, because it's a package, and it dings on my phone to say the package got there, and I'll go get it when I get around to it. But then there was knocking, and I'm like, oh, all right, fine. I'm like, I have no idea. So I open the door, and there's this lady standing there. And she says, ma'am, I was on a phone call to Seattle, and the minutes on my phone ran out. And my daughter was in a severe accident and is being taken to the burn unit. Can I use a phone? Because I was talking to the doctor, and I got cut off because the minutes ran out on my phone. And I could have just said, I don't want to be bothered with you, and closed the door. Instead, I went, got my phone, she called, was able to get some more contact information for the doctor and how she could reach him back. But before and I could have just left it at that. She took care of what she needed to do, and there I get brownie points, I get gold stars, I was helpful. And there was just this small prompting, because if you've ever gotten the phone call where you've got a family member who's in trouble, your whole world flips upside down, and you don't think coherently, everything is spinning a million miles an hour. And here she was, and I just said, can I pray for you? And not the, I'll pray for you when you leave, and if I remember sometime this week. I've been prompted lately by God to say, when I'm going to pray for somebody, it's an instant stop right then and pray for them then. And so I took her hand and I said, I don't know if you believe or not, but I want to pray. And so I asked her daughter's name, and we prayed on the porch. And I said, God, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you're doing, but I need you to give peace in the uncertainty and knowledge for doctors to help this family through this tragedy. And that was it. I gave her a hug, and she went on her way. I don't know the rest of the story, but I know I did what I was called to do in that moment, and I know that it removed me from my mess to helping somebody else. Some of us need to start realizing we're going to have to get out of us and start helping somebody else. I can remember when I told you that I was put on bed rest. And when I finally got released from bed rest after several weeks, I had a lot of restrictions put on me. I couldn't play sports. I couldn't do a lot of things. And I was sitting there. I told you I already was teaching a Sunday school class. And I was like, okay, God, what else? What more? I can't. If I just sit here and focus on the fact of all the things I can't do, I'm going to go stir crazy. Or I'm going to start getting into trouble. So God, what more can I do? And I got the opportunity to start speaking before some youth groups. To say, God sees you even when you don't get that anybody sees you. Things are going to happen in your world that you don't understand, but God's there. He's somebody you can lean on. I got to be put on our youth council at church and got to start helping shape the direction of what we were doing as a youth group, where we were going, who we were trying to reach. I realized that God was using me in small ways to start changing other people's worlds. Nothing I was saying was big or different. I just wasn't some 25 or 30-year-old telling them God loves you. I was somebody their age going through a mess myself who could say, I get the not understanding. When I took the focus off my problem, I saw God's big picture plan for more of what I was supposed to do. And it got me through my struggles when I stopped being so focused on me. So you don't always sense it right away. But as you continue to walk with God, you're going to sense that he's with you. We talked about this in Goosebump God. Sometimes God feels a little farther away because he's saying, hurry up and catch up with me over here because I need you to go deeper. I need you to be connected to me over here. Yeah, you dipped your toe in, but yeah, it's time to go ankle deep. It's time to go knee deep. It's time to go in all the way over your head because God's got a purpose in the pain. Whatever you're going through, God can work it and mold it and use it because his job is to transform you from where you're at to who he needs you to be. The second thing that I want you to remember, God is always present in your pain. God is always present in your pain. See, when you're hurting, he's there. Psalms 46, verse 1 says that God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. That verse doesn't say, you're having difficulty, I'm out of here. You're having difficulty, I told you to figure it out yourself. You're having difficulty, this isn't my problem. It says, I'm there when you're in trouble. So often we get caught up in the God, I want this. Give me these things, God. I need you to do X, Y, Z. And God's saying, I want you to see what I need you to do. I want you to see that I'm all you need. We say, God, I want you to do this. I want you to let me go here. I want the new car. I want the new house. I want the better husband. I want the different boyfriend. I want the new shoes. God, I want these things. And God says, I'm the source of everything you need. I know you got a big Christmas want list, but I'm what you need. See, there's no better example of this to me than Paul. So Paul has a really interesting story. If you don't know much about it, I'm going to give you synopsis. Paul's name didn't used to be Paul. Paul's name used to be Saul. And Saul hated Christians. Not like sometimes you go, yeah, I really don't like how that person's acting. They give Christians a bad name. No. Paul was going around killing them, persecuting them, having them thrown in jail just for the fact that they were claiming to be Christians. I don't think any of you have gotten that far yet where you're chopping off people's heads and things. So one day, something amazing happens. God shows up in Saul's life, like stops him on the road, blinds him, and he speaks to him and says, I've called you to something better than what you're doing. So Paul turns his whole world around, and instead of persecuting Christians, now he wants to go tell everybody he can about who Jesus is and what was done and who he was and how new life can be found in him. See, Paul did more for the gospel than maybe anybody since Jesus. He started more churches, and he wrote most of the New Testament. So you would think this is a pretty special guy. God really likes this guy. Like, nothing bad is ever going to happen to this guy because he's God's chosen one. Except for if you read what Paul writes, there comes a time in Paul's life where he gets this thing. He calls it a thorn. Doesn't say what it is, just calls it a thorn. But it was massively painful and destructive to his everyday life. So he's doing everything right. He's teaching people about Jesus. He's starting churches. He's writing parts of the Bible. Why on earth would God give him a thorn, this difficulty? And he pleads with God on 3 separate times to say, God, could you take this away? Like, I get the pleading. Like, I pleaded, God, like don't take my mom. Like, you have the ability to heal. So heal her. But, so if you think God's going to heal somebody, he's going to heal the guy that suffered, who's been beaten, who's been left for dead, who was shipwrecked, who was snake bitten, who was whipped so many times his back didn't look like a human back. He was stoned for Jesus. And I'm not talking about the recreational kind because we live here in Washington, so. This is Jesus, who has the ability to touch and heal, and Paul, who's like his biggest champion out there saying, yeah, could you take this away? And he goes, let's see what he actually says. Paul's pleading, heal me, heal me, heal me, and God says this to him in 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. But God, I've told all these people about you. I've spread the gospel. I've done all this stuff. Why couldn't you do this one little itty bitty thing for me and make this whatever it was go away? The heal me, change me, fix my pain. God simply says, my grace is good enough for you. We get into that, this is what I need, God. And God says, no. I'm what you need. See, when God's helped you through a really difficult time in your life, and when you're going through it, you may not have realized it on the other side. Sometimes it's hard to put into words what God actually did, how he showed up, how he carried you, how he lifted you up, how he got you out of bed when you were in such deep depression you didn't think you'd ever get out of bed again. Because he said, I'm enough. I can do it. He gave you hope that maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe if I just talk to God one more time, if I go to church one more time, if I reach out and help one more person, maybe that would fix it. Maybe that would be my end point. So you can now testify that in those dark days, in those uncertain moments, that God's enough. We sometimes forget that when life starts going good, and we think we're doing it on our own, that no. God's grace is sufficient for me. Paul went on to say that it was actually a good thing that God didn't fix him. Verse 9 and 10 says, therefore I'll boast all the more gladly about my weakness so that Christ's power may rest in me. That's what I want to do. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Some of you need to start saying, you know what? I'm going to delight in my migraines because they draw me closer to God. I'm going to delight in this lonely season because in it I'm experiencing Emmanuel, God with me. I delight in my job search because God is my provider. I delight in this difficult season because God's breaking me of some self-sufficiency because I need to be more dependent on him. Here's the bottom line. A lot of you right now are taking the Instagram moment, that tiny snapshot, that just 1 second of your existence, and you're piling everything in that moment. And you look at it and say, well, I don't like that moment. I don't understand that moment. It doesn't seem fair to me that I'm going through this moment. But I want you to look at your life. If you took any 10-year block of your life, and you, in that 10 years, were walking with Christ, pursuing him daily, this is what you'd have. You'd have moments of, I don't get it. I didn't choose that. Wouldn't have really wanted to go through that, God, if, like, I'm honest, yeah, could we have taken any other detour around that hole? But when you look back at that 10-year block and you actually see everything that went on, you can say, God was with me. He was strong enough for me when I wasn't strong enough to get myself moving. I couldn't have done that if I'd been on my own. Would have never chosen it, didn't want to go through it, but God was there for me in it. See, some of you need to get outside of yourself because you're sitting here today and you're asking the why God question. You're just existing. Well, guess what? God created you for more. God didn't create you just to exist. God gave you, every single one of you, gifts and abilities that only he gave you. He did not give everyone the gifts and abilities he gave you. He gifted them individually to each of us because he's called each and every one of us to do something specific, to reach specific people at a specific time. You're never going to feel better just existing. You have to be involved in serving others. It's an amazing thing that happens when we start helping somebody else. Now, your pain doesn't go away, but when you take the focus off of you and put it on somebody else, you sure don't think about it as much. That back that really hurts, well, you know what? I'm passing out Thanksgiving meals, and my back might hurt, but it feels really good to do that. Showing up at Halloween and seeing smiling little kids' faces. Man, my leg still hurts. I don't have a job yet, God, but I'm going to give my time. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be faithful in God's house. Because our pain will get pushed to the side, and we'll begin to remember who God called us to be, and that He's going to work it all out. And I can stand here and say it to you because I've done it. I've seen it. I know it works. I'm not saying something because it was in the Bible and it sounds good to stand up here and say. I've done it. I know that I can get self-consumed in my struggles, but the moment I step out of me and begin to help somebody else, see somebody else's pain, do something for someone else, big or small, I know it changes my outlook. So how can you believe in a God who doesn't seem to care? I get asked a lot of times by people, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, my question to you actually is quite the opposite. Why do good things happen to bad people? Why are you so shocked? You're like, well, why do bad things happen? They're doing it all right. They've got it all figured out. And all of a sudden a car accident killed their family. God is not punishing them. But my question is, why do good things happen to bad people? Guess what? I'm a bad person. We talked about this in our Goosebumps that we talked about a few weeks ago. We're all sinners. We've all messed up. No one gets here to stand here and say, I'm a good person. I can show you over and over again in the Bible where your heart is sinful and you, without God, aren't good enough. So why the question? If you're going to ask the question, you have to ask the opposite question. Why do good things happen to bad people? If anything good has ever happened to you, you should sit back and say, well, why would God help a bad person? Why would God help a sinner? Why did God allow me to get that job? Why did God allow that person to pay for my gas or my groceries? Why did any of that happen to me, God? Because I don't deserve it. And you might sit here and say, well, Pastor, I'd like to challenge you. My life's a real mess. I'm not really blessed. Well, you have enough health that you showed up here this morning. Your health may not be perfect, but you had enough health to get yourself out of your house. You got dressed, you got showered, you got here, and you're sitting and breathing. You may be in pain, but you've got enough health to still move. You've got people around you that love you. They may not be your family, but in this house, you've got family, and they love you. If you drove here in a car today, did you know that you are in the top 5% of the wealthiest people on the planet? So don't tell me you're not blessed. Do you have a toilet that flushes? I'm pretty sure I don't have anybody here that goes in an outhouse. So you have a toilet that flushes. Yeah. Be really grateful for that you're not like having to take a bucket out and dumping it or going outside. Winter's coming, people. You got to show up in God's house, and you got to speak His name out loud today. You got to raise your hands in worship, and you didn't have to fear that someone was going to come in here and drag you off to jail, and you might never see your family again. You had the freedom to worship, so don't tell me you're not blessed. Don't tell me you're not blessed. So you've got to be thankful and start recognizing what God has given you. So there's a lot of good things have happened to a lot of bad people in this room. So you might ask the question, well, is God fair? I'm telling you, absolutely not. That may shock you. The pastor just told me God's not fair. Oh, you better believe God's not fair, and I thank God for it every day. Now, I will tell you this, God is just, but God is not fair. Because if God was fair, I'd have to pay my own way for my sins. And I've told you before, I don't see a line around anybody in this room saying, well, every time you mess up, I'll take the whipping. I'll take the beating for it. No. See, God said, I love you so much, I'm going to send my son, and he's going to pay the price for your mess ups. Because my God's not fair, but he sure is just. Psalms 103 says this, God does not treat us as our sins deserve, or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens above are the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed your transgressions from us. That's why I get to stand up and praise his name. That's why I say I don't care what the question is. God's not fair, but he certainly is just. So every now and then you've got to take a minute and thank God for all the things you've got. You've got to thank God right off the bat that he's not fair, because he doesn't give us what we deserve. So when you're tempted to look and say, God, why did that happen? Why would you allow that? I'm going to challenge you. Look at this from God's perspective. I sent my son whom I loved, and he died on a cross. I had to turn away in my son's most desperate moment as he's crying out and saying, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? And I have to turn my head because I love everybody else enough to say, if my son pays the price, you all go free. Because when you hurt, God hurts. So don't sit there and say, I'm all alone. You're not alone. God is with you. God is for you. God loves you. See, our God is not a heartless God. My God doesn't just love me. Our God doesn't just love you. He is love. Because it's not what he does, it's who he is. It's who he is. He is love. He is there in the hurt. He is there in the not understanding. It's okay to ask the question. It's not okay to get stuck that it didn't go how you wanted it to. I'm going to ask you all to bow your heads. Father God, we come to you today. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to ask the question, to truly begin to understand and see who you are, to be reminded of how much we are loved, to be reminded that when it hurts, you hurt. When it's confusing, you're there and want to comfort. God, there's some of us in here today and we're going through something and we don't understand it. We've been asking the why, God, don't you care? Don't you love me? Don't you see it? What did I do? Why am I being punished? If you've been asking those questions, I want to ask you to raise your hand because I want to pray just for you this morning. If you've asked the question, why God, why am I going through this? Why did you take that person? Why isn't it going how I wanted to? You can put your hands down. Father God, you saw the hands. You know the hurt. You know the uncertainty. But you have promised you are with us in the pain. You have a purpose to transform us, to work within us, to not leave us how we came in the building this morning when we go out, because you are love. You are our hope. You are our everything. So God, you be in their lives. You help them see who you are. We don't maybe understand this side of heaven, why it's happening. But we are there. And we know we're not alone, that you go with us. We thank you, Father God. We thank you for being here this morning, for what you're beginning in these people. You're beginning healing. You're beginning restoration. You're reminding them that you're just there. And that's enough, God. I don't need all the answers. I just need to know that you're there. So help them be reminded of that today and every day this week, that you are